A very wise and holy man, whose name I will not mention right away, gave me this advice once. He said, "We all seek a more just society. We all talk about change. But the only change worthy of the name is brought about by men and women who are prepared to suffer." A lot of the professional political class today talks a good game. They are desirous of glory, yet fearful of failure. And when push comes to shove, they blink. Change requires courage. We all are familiar with Einstein's quote. Insanity is defined by doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. For 40 years, I have watched the Republican Party do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And we're going to do something different. On October 14th of this year, I sent a letter to all 80 state committee members. And I set forth the 3 fundamental objectives that would be mine were I elected chairman. Number 1, to articulate clearly, forcefully, and without apology the conservative Republican canons of government and to oppose them to the democratic model that has impoverished my generation and is now setting about to impoverish the generation of my children and grandchildren. That's number 1. A clear, clarion call and assertion of Republican principles. 2, candidates. It is undemocratic in the extreme that a voter should go to the polls and have no Republican choice for the low ballot positions. My second objective would be to proactively and aggressively recruit men and women from all walks of life, from all occupations, to run as principled and likable Republican candidates. I use those 2 adjectives, principled and likable. Each is sufficient. Neither by itself, each is necessary, neither by itself is sufficient. Candidates must be principled, which means they must be competent. We know that. But candidates must also be likable and electable. The days when a Republican candidate who has no social skills and who couldn't walk into a Knights of Columbus Hall in Charlestown and come out with any votes runs as a candidate for our party are quite simply over. There are plenty of likable, principled candidates. And my second mission as chairman would be to find them and to challenge them to run as GOP candidates. Thirdly, with 1 and 2 in place, I would raise money. The problem with the GOP in my lifetime is it has inverted that process. First it raises money, then it tries to find candidates, and then they scramble around to try to figure out what they believe in. That's the wrong way. It should be the other way around. Just as in business, money follows value. So too in politics. Money, donors, will follow value. The reason I'm in this is because I have seen in my 40+ years of watching Massachusetts politics the following phenomenon. The GOP depends for its vitality and its longevity on the rising up of one personality every 10 years. In 1960, when I was in college, it was Frank Sargent, GOP governor of Massachusetts. He was followed by John Volpe, GOP governor. We all know about Bill Weld, Paul Cellucci, Jane Swift, Mitt Romney, and at the end of the day, almost Charlie Baker. A person in Oklahoma or Idaho looking at this history, might conclude that the Massachusetts Republican Party is very healthy. After all, I count 6 or 7 governors whom you've been able to rise up, who could take the, who succeeded in securing the corner office. Must be pretty healthy. But in fact, a closer examination shows that when these governors, these folks at the top of the ticket, move off in search of other worlds to conquer, what is left behind is a charred campsite, a ruined landscape. And the reason is, you don't build something from the top down, you build it from the bottom up. And as chairman, I would focus on the institutionalization of our party's strength, beginning at the town committee, city committee, and local and state rep races. The days when one personality cherry picks and sucks the lifeblood out of the flower, leaving no roots, is over. I am used to going against the grain. I've been involved in the trenches of cultural warfare since college. When Al Gore was a classmate of mine, and so was Tommy Lee Jones. And 90% of these guys were trying to figure out a way to get out of the Vietnam War. I volunteered for duty and spent 2 deployments over there in the United States Navy. I'm not boasting. I really don't think I did anything that anybody in this room wouldn't have done if you had been I. The irony is that back in those days, wearing the uniform of your country was something that incurred the wrath of all of liberal academia. I think of the 1,200 guys who were in my class, I think 20 ended up joining the service during Vietnam. Now, what am I saying all this for? I am flawed. I've got defects. I am not a perfect member of the human race. But there's one thing I know. In order for change to happen, you have to go culturally against the grain. You've got to be prepared to incur the criticism of so-called respectable opinion. You've got to be prepared to say, I don't care what the editorial board of the New York Times or the Boston Globe says. Our adversaries are the professional political class, comprised largely of Democrats, but some Republicans too. Big government, big labor, mainstream media, the people who lay up burdens on the shoulders of citizens and do nothing to lift a finger to aid those burdens. That's the enemy, the new professional political class. So we need to come together, stop fighting, draw on the considerable resources of the conservative movement, and we need to lead the Republican Party. We are the new establishment. So we got a battle for the heart and soul of this party, and we need to be prepared to unite with every man and woman of goodwill and not apply litmus tests, because I've been hurt by those litmus tests and I wouldn't want to hurt anybody else by applying one of my own. I cannot help but note that, and you all know this, Ronald Reagan took this state twice, in 1980 and 1984. He did it against all odds. Okay? What's the relevance of this? The relevance of this is that a likable man like Ronald Reagan, who was unafraid to articulate conservative Republican principles in a way that could be understood by people, was able to win Massachusetts not once, but twice, running as a presidential candidate. And that was done at a time when the economy was not nearly as bad as it is now, when many of the cultural indexes were not nearly as threatening as they are today. So don't be afraid Be not afraid of conservative Republican values. It is not that they have been tried and failed. It's when they are tried, they succeed. And I think our fellow citizens of Massachusetts will respond if we set forth these values in a clear, forceful, and unapologetic way. So that's parents' rights. Well, I'm here at your Mara debate. I'm not afraid to come to the NYSA Columbus Hall in Worcester on a Sunday afternoon. Does that tell you something about what I wouldn't be afraid to do? Okay, I ran against Tip O'Neill. I've been speaking truth to liberal power all my life. I don't care about the opinions of the respectable. I know that people who stand up for principles such as parents are the primary educators of their children, right to life is sacred, traditional marriage is what it is. Oh, and let me say something about traditional marriage. For 25,000 years or more, everybody has agreed that marriage constitutes the union of one man and one woman. Now, all of a sudden, there's another, quote, paradigm, to quote Justice Margaret Marshall. And now, all of a sudden, I'm a bigot because I think marriage is one man and one woman, the same that everybody has thought for 25,000 years. All of a sudden, Frank McNamara is a bigot. That's nonsense. And no one in this room would ever shirk from confronting that nonsense and allying themselves with the people who fight as you do, Brian.